Welcome back to another episode of the Experts in Fire podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vennard, and with me today is Randy Mowry. Today's episode is A Beginner's Guide to Wood Stoves. Let's get into it. Hey Randy, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing today, Mike?
I am fantastic as well. It is beautiful July here in the gorgeous state of Michigan, and it doesn't get any better. I think this is the pinnacle.
We're heading down now. We're going to start to get a little cooler as things progress a little bit, hopefully, and kind of point where we're talking today so people can start using these wood stoves.
Yep, 100%. We're going to talk about wood stoves, and you're going to need them. Now is the time to prepare, though. Now is the time. It is. I know most of my buddies who are cutting wood do not like cutting wood right now. It's too warm. It's too buggy. They either do it early spring or they do it late fall. But if you're cutting and splitting, and we'll talk about this, that's for next year. You should already be in the groove with your wood for this year. Randy, we are talking about a beginner's guide to wood stoves and really just kind of walking through wood stoves in general. I know there have been a lot of changes over the years, so where do you want to start and what do you want to discuss about wood stoves? So many places we can go with this.
There really is. You know, we've carried, obviously, wood stoves for a long time, and wood stoves been around since the 1500s. So it's definitely nothing new. I guess we could just start with like the structure that's made up of a wood stove. And this, covers most wood stoves, no matter what you're looking at, as from a category of wood stoves, aesthetic-wise and things like that, just the components that they're made up and the materials, Mike.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, big stoves, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, like the one that we moved for you that one time, that thing was a lot of cast iron, if I remember correctly, on that bad boy,
You are remembering correctly, yes.
Then you have a number of stoves that are constructed out of steel, and then some may be a steel structure with some type of soapstone exterior to them. Interior-wise, you'll find the bulk of the stoves have like a fire brick material inside them to help hold and radiate that heat inside of them. And then you have some of them that are stainless steel inside of them, the fireboxes versus fire brick. So they definitely, material-wise, are all over the place. And, and it's really not so much that one maybe is better than another. Their functionality is going to be a little bit different, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking price points, right? You're looking at some of them are going to be easier to make, so they'll be better on the pocketbook, whereas others take a little more intensity, especially, when you start talking about the stone and the soapstone and things of that nature. And then they're all going to function differently as well. They're going to handle heat different, and all the way up to the soapstone where you warm that stone. I was just having this conversation with Andrew the other day. We were talking about our childhoods, and I laughed. I said, well, I still cut and split wood for the cabin where you helped me put that insert in. And you don't get warm in the cabin until the concrete warms up. It's just a concrete slab.
Oh, the floor, yeah, because of the concrete floor, absolutely.
And it's like once the concrete slab warms up, now it's too warm. You're barely putting wood into the wood stove. You got windows and doors open, and Andrew started laughing. He said, "You just described my childhood." I'm like, yeah,
right.
That's how it works.
A wood stove is going to function differently in a different house. You could buy the same exact stove and you put it in two different properties. They're going to operate a little bit different because of the envelope of each home. So yeah, that's so funny.
I'm glad you said that too, Randy, because folks who are digging into wood stoves and my buddy got a fill in the blank doesn't always mean that that's going to be the right one for you. Although, let's be honest, wood stoves, they're how many BTUs, a lot of them are rated by, square footage, that it'll heat, things of that nature. So do your homework, do your diligence, but we'll definitely talk through some of the components and some of the things you can be looking at, because I believe it was one great Randy Mowry who taught me there are certain things that if you don't enjoy changing your own oil, then you might not want to buy this one. One of those components is coming up here.
Yeah, so what you find with, stoves themselves, components are made up, you have your stove, you have your chimney itself, and then within the stove itself, you have a damper, a baffling system, and then what we're going to talk about is some of them also going to have some type of catalytic type of combustor inside of it. So those are the primary, we'll call it, components that make up a getting a wood stove, getting it put together, things like that. And then as far as the types of wood stoves, Mike, you have your catalytic wood stoves and then your non-catalytic.
You have fire-related questions, and we have answers. You can email us your questions at podcast@woodlanddirect.com or give us a call at 586-221-3638. We would love to be able to answer them right here on the Experts in Fire podcast.
The Catalytic wood stoves, they're still around. They're still available. They were really popular for quite some time. A Catalytic wood stove aesthetically looks the same, in all aspects, except the interior part of it has a ceramic honeycomb-shaped component on the top of the unit itself. And what this part does is actually it burns those gases and particles from the wood burning inside, and then that process helps create more heat, less emissions, and that's why it was created. Emissions is a grams per hour. I believe it was back in like in 88 or somewhere around there. It was like 4 grams per hour is where it was. EPA really started to watch it, and then 2020 it was changed lower. So now most stoves you're going to find are going to be in that 1 to 4 gram range now. So that is just what's being put out into like the atmosphere, into the air itself. These grams per hour, like the smoke. So the Catalytic stove will require more maintenance because of this ceramic component. It's like ceramic on an infrared, like a grill, a ceramic piece, honeycomb piece on a barbecue grill, Mike. It's fragile. It's going to wear, and if it gets hit or something with it, you can crack it or break it. There's going to be more maintenance involved as far as the cleaning process and the maintaining of the ceramic pieces. And not to deter anybody from this, because some folks do like that part of it still. It's just there is more maintenance on it, and you always want to refer to the manual of that because it could vary a little bit per manufacturer of what that maintenance is. So we're really not going to get into that part of it. Just want folks to know about it.
I'm also thinking, if I made the comment earlier, if you're going to change your own oil, you might like these things. And this is what I was talking about, right? Because you have maintenance, and I'm driving my truck the other day and it goes bing, oil change, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take that somewhere at some point. I'm thinking though, with this type of situation, if let's be honest, I used to at one point in life be the guy who was going to run a brush. I've bought brushes from Woodland and stuff and cleaned my wood burning chimney, and I'm just at a stage, man, where with the way these systems work now, the fact that they're metal pipes, most of these are and we'll talk about venting later, even if it's an insert, it's going to have some type of liner on it. It's just way better to have a sweep come out. And we have a lot of sweep partners out there and do their thing. And they'd be able to look at that. That's a part of what they do, right? Is to look at that ceramic piece.
Yeah, the inspections of the wood stoves. I mean, they should be absolutely doing that part of the inspections when they're coming out and doing a complete inspection on it, and getting in there with a light to be able to take a look at it and confirming that those pieces are okay, so that you can get through that next season without any problems.
Good deal. Okay, so you can pay somebody to do this for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that it's such a rarity, but it is a point that I'm not sure if folks like to talk about it when they're looking to try to sell something. I probably over information people when I'm offering products because I do want them to be able to make the best decision they can. If something like you said, I'm sorry, but I'm not changing my own oil. I go to the dealership. I don't have the garage for it. I let them do it. They're the professionals.
Exactly. So we have catalytic, we have non-catalytic. What does the non-catalytic do? Because I know they're both EPA certified, but what does the non-catalytic do to obtain that certification?
Yeah, so the non-catalytic version is it's a less expensive unit versus the Cadillac version. Because they don't have the Cadillac element to it. They use it's a tube baffling system that's in the tops of the stoves themselves, versus that ceramic component. So those are usually made up of like a stainless steel tubing in a lot of cases on the tops of those units.
And I got to tell you that dual baffling is pretty awesome. And I'm not knocking the catalytic. You do your research and choose the one that you prefer. But I know this, when I sit there and watch basically the baffles are re-injecting oxygen into the chamber, so you can get a secondary burn and get more of the byproduct burned off. And what we're talking about here, folks, is when you burn wood, like around a campfire, you see the smoke going up into the air. That's what the EPA is keeping an eye on. That's what the manufacturers have to make sure that more of that smoke burns off, because that's not complete combustion yet. So inside of that wood stove, the catalytic piece helps that, and it reburns that byproduct so that it's a cleaner burn. And then with the baffles, the non-catalytic, man, I'll lay across the room because our cabin is wide open, and just watch, and you can see the oxygen gets pushed in from the baffles above, and you have flames above and flames below, and it's so cool, man. It's a great fire.
It's not that it's a better way of doing it. It's a less expensive way to doing it with the secondary burn and the baffling system versus having the Cadillac converters. And then you also end up, Mike, you have less maintenance, of course, on the unit itself versus the Cadillac version. That helps as well. And like you said, they're both EPA certified. They're both meeting the same guidelines of your grams per minute and that 1 to 4 range these days. It's just a different way of doing it.
To keep in mind, though, there still is, to be fair to the catalytic version, there still is maintenance that's going to need to be done to the baffles over time. Just letting everyone know that those baffles are wear pieces, I guess you would say. And over time, you may have to have your chimney professional come out and take a look at those, and keep your manual either digitally or your paper version somewhere. We have that drawer. Come on. Everybody has that drawer.
Everybody has that file cabinet drawer.
So, but yeah, the baffles are pieces that can be replaced over time and should be replaced over time as you burn more and more. We don't burn a ton, so, I'm thinking this thing's going to last a long time. My kids are going to be looking at it and go, Dad, what did you buy? I'm like, something.
Right.
But if you're looking to burn a lot, then those are definitely two good things to look at. So
yeah, and like you said, they're gonna last a long time. Whether it's the Cadillac version or the non-Cadillac version.
Yeah, love it. Let's get into. So we've talked about the units themselves. How they're built, constructed, fit into the EPA certification. But let's be honest, none of it matters. It's just cool looking when it's sitting there. It's really about what you're putting into it.
Yeah, wood stove doesn't work if you don't have wood in it.
It's just a big piece of metal sitting there. So what are some things that our listeners should be, because I know as gas prices continue to fluctuate and they're always changing, folks tend to look toward wood. And there are some things you need to know, because I've cut a lot of trees and I have split a lot of wood. What are some things people should be thinking about when it comes to the wood for their wood stoves?
The simplest thing, it's funny, it may sound silly, but you want to plan for, where you're going to store that wood, where you're going to put it, because, depending on your usage, like you talked about, you may need quite a bit of wood, and that's going to vary on the usage itself. Wood storage, there's tons of different types of storage racks that you can get online. We offer quite a few of them. I guess, some of the important keys to touch on would be, just making sure that that's up off the ground, that you have constant air circulating around that wood. Because ideally, Mike, you want that wood as dry as possible. The drier, the better. It's going to burn better. The wetter that wood is, the more smoke and creosote you can build up in it.
If you're looking at getting into wood burning, if you're listening to the podcast here, you can really nerd out on what type of wood, how to dry the wood, moisture meters, all the things that you can do.
Oh, there's a plethora of information on, just like you said, that the BTU ratings of certain woods versus other woods. Yes, it's endless.
Yes. And even how to cover the wood. We have some people who want to completely cover the wood. And then we ask the question, well, where's the moisture going as it comes out of the wood? And people usually go, well, I didn't think of that. Right. They feel like it's going to rain or it's going to snow, therefore I have to cover the wood so it doesn't get wet. And you're like, no, the point of it is get it stacked and let the wind blow through it and just let it dry out over time. Now, I know you had listed how long should that be? What, and how should you stack it?
Yeah, so I guess like the rule of thumb to get seasoned dry wood is like 6 to 12 months typically. That's kind of like your rule of thumb. Most people are going to cut that between 12 and 24 inches depending on the size of their wood stove, and that's one of the things you want to think about when if you're having to buy wood from a wood supplier, someone that does that for a living. You want to make sure that you get that to the right size, because not all stoves interior wise are going to be the same. Somebody that has maybe a small 1,000 square foot house may only have a stove that can fit an 8 to 10, 12-inch log in it, and then somebody that has a much larger stove might be able to get a 24-inch log in it. So those are some things to consider with the wood as well. It's just not about the storage, but it's the cut, it's the size, the split, and things like that.
I'm sitting here, my brain is going wild, and this podcast is already getting too long.
And that's one of the things too. You mentioned it earlier, Mike, is like the moisture meter. Folks that are just getting into this, they can easily buy like a digital. They make these little digital moisture meters. They can kind of keep an eye on their wood. Ideal range is typically in that 10 to 20% of moisture to give you a nice burn. So it's something that folks can do and check and watch over their wood as they're starting to use it. And then I guess it just goes into some of the what woods people are going to use.
If you're new to it, you just think wood is wood, especially if you've sat around fires. You're thinking this would be awesome to have inside. You have to be cognizant of, man, if it's a soft wood, if it's a sappy wood, you don't want to burn that inside. It's going to gunk up all the stuff we've already talked about. Whether you have a catalyst or baffles, it's gonna run the risk of putting creosote in your chimney or whatever type of pipe you're using, Class A pipe, and that runs the risk, and I've got to be cautious, I'm not fear-mongering or anything, but it runs the risk of chimney fires. So the type of wood you use is going to be extremely important in the safety of the entire system.
Oh, absolutely. And there's resources online folks can go to. You can just look up like a firewood resource and it'll give you all the information. But typically, like you said, like any oak is always good. Hickories, beeches, beechwood, those are good. But there's definitely things that you can get online resource-wise and find what wood is going to be best for your particular area.
Okay. This is just 101. This is just a beginner's class, so I'm getting way too deep.
Yeah, we're not getting crazy. I think it's time we might want to move into a little bit of installation.
Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
The stoves themselves, we talked about, a little bit. They're coming in various sizes, the heat output based on the square footage of the space that you're trying to heat up. And so that's also going to matter for, we're getting to size and location inside the house itself of, where you're going to put this, unit. You don't want to put a unit that's too big where, it's going to, bake you out of the house, and you don't want one that's too small that is not going to heat up the space the way you want it. The footprint of where the stove is going to go as well, Mike, as far as your clearances around that stove, those are going to vary per stove as well, Mike, as far as the clearances to the combustibles, we're going to call it.
We're talking about just in an introduction here for folks who, and we run into this with fireplaces as well, huh, Randy?
We do.
I found a wall and it needs something, and I think it should be fire. That's how fireplaces go. When it comes to a wood stove, usually folks are looking at their home going, man, I'm sick of paying this fuel oil bill or propane bill or natural gas bill to heat this place. I have the strength, I have the ability, and I love to burn wood. I want to do it, and that's a good spot for it. Usually when it comes to a wood stove, you don't necessarily get to pick the spot. It's going to pick the spot on where it goes in your home. And I'm careful when I say that because there's so many things that go into play, but safety. We always talk about it. It needs to go where it needs to go. So much to consider.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, because it takes us right into the like kind of the next point of, it's the venting. If you have, for example, a 2-story house and you have bedrooms above it, things like that, well, that stove is going to end up having to be on an outside wall where you can go vertical 90 out the wall and then go vertical again on the exterior side of the house all the way up, beyond the roof to vent it. Typically, you're not going to be able to vent it through the second story. Now, where if you have a ranch style home, nothing above it but attic space, then yeah, if you want it in the middle of the room, you might be able to do that because you can just go straight vertical through the house. So it's right on point because, like you just said, the stove itself and how you're going to vent it is really going to dictate where it's going to go. Also, talking about the wall is, what is on that wall? Are there bookshelves on that wall? If you put the stove between the bookshelves, do you have enough clearance there? So there's quite a few things based on the stove that are going to play into the placement of the stove inside the house itself.
Sometimes people just want to, I'll just shove it in that corner over there. That way it'll be functional as well as it'll kind of, look cool in the corner over there. And you're like, well, hold on. Now you have two walls we're talking about. So, things to consider. These things get hot. They have clearances to combustibles. You can shrink those clearances if you follow certain steps to make sure your wall is protected. And what most folks don't consider is they think, well, it's not that hot. I'm not going to burn it that bad. That's not our concern. Our concern is any combustible you're drying out over a long period of time, regardless of how much you use it. You're just drying that, which means its flash point or its ignition point decreases over time. That's just a piece of the safety that you need to know when you're putting in something like this. So
exactly. Yeah, that's why every stove has a floor protection and some type of wall protection to those clearances that you were talking about. Absolutely.
And folks, you can't put a wood stove on a wood floor. I'm just going to tell you now.
No.
I'm telling you right now. You can't do that.
Always refer to the manual. Safety, safety, safety.
All right, Randy, we have covered a lot, man. This has been a lot of fun.
We have. I know it's not everything, folks, and if there's something else you guys want to hear, just let us know, but I think it gives a good guide, Mike.
I agree. And thank you all for listening. If you have more questions, like Randy said, please reach out. If you have comments, concerns, reach out. We've given you multiple ways as you listen to the podcast here that you can reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to chat with you. And as always, Randy, it's always good chatting with you, brother. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this.
Absolutely. Always good to talk with you, sir.
And we're out. Join us next time for Gas Fireplace Solutions for Commercial Spaces. We'll see you then.